Hello, welcome back. Today, we are going to learn about UiPath, data tables and looping concept. This is an important session, and please practice for better results. Let's go to the session. Hi all, from today onwards, we are going to jump into the core components of UiPath. Please make sure you practice this in order to get better results. Before we start, I would like to give an overview of when and where this robotic solution is applicable at your company, or on your daily tasks. If you are doing a repeated, manual process, then you can think about robotic solution, and that save huge amount of time for your organization, as well as it saves time for you. In the upcoming weeks, we are going to work on the real projects, which showcase how robotic solution can improve the productivity. Data tables are one of the core components of UiPath. Without knowing about data tables, you cannot work on real application projects. This is just an introduction of data tables. We are going to play around with the table, which we downloaded last week. If you don't have the table, you can check the link on the top left corner, and make the table ready, before you start practicing this. When we think about data table, or dataset, the first thing which came in our mind, is dimension. That is the number of rows, and number of columns. To calculate the number of rows, in a table, you can specify, name of your data table variable, rows, count. To calculate the number of columns, in a table, you can specify, name of your data table variable, columns, count. Row index, or column index of a dataset, or data table, is another important concept. One of the important thing you should remember, when you work with UiPath is, the index, of both column and row, starts at 0. For example, if you specify the column index, as 1, then you actually referring, the second column. Same concept, applicable to row as well. To access a particular element, you can use any of the method, which showing in the table. One method is, you can specify the name of the data table variable, and then specify row and column number inside a bracket. Second method is, specify the data table variable, rows, inside bracket, specify the row number, item, inside bracket, specify the column number. We are going to explore all the methods and introduction to looping concepts. Let's jump into the session.
In today's session, we are going to start from the place where we left last week. Last week, we have saved a CSV file. The data is quality of life index data. And for this learning table purpose, we are going to play around with this particular data. So as a first step, you can just open this file and save this file in the form of an Excel file. So before that, you just need to remember the sheet name. So I'm just renaming this to sheet 1, and then I'm going to save this file in the form of Excel within the same folder. And then you can close the file. In the last 2 weeks, you know how to create a process. So I'm not going to start from the process. So I just start a new process, and I have named as learn table concept. So I'm just going to start the entire flowchart within the main workflow. You can go to the activities and search for flowchart. You can drag and drop this flowchart to the activity windows, and then you can double click and activate it. So our next step is, we are going to read the Excel file. To read the Excel file, there is a dedicated application called Excel application scope. You can type Excel application and it opens up an activity called Excel application under the app integration Excel application scope menu. You can click and drag and drop to the flowchart. So here there are a couple of parameters we have to specify. First one, you can open the Excel application scope, and the first parameter is the workbook book path. And here it says text must be quoted. You can select the particular file, go to the folder where you saved your file, click and open. And next activity is, in order to read this file, you have to add a read range activity. So you can just go to the activities and type read range. So in order to drag and drop the do block, you can double click and then you can read this activity here, and then you can go inside. So here we have to specify some more parameters. The first parameter is the sheet name. By default it is created sheet 1, and sheet 1 is the same name which we have given earlier. And the second one is range. So our range is starts from A1. So I'm just giving A1 and click OK. And here you can see a data table option. So what it means, once you read the file, in which name you would like to output this table data into a data table format. So nothing but your data set. So for that you can just click on this three dot icon and create a new variable. Just click on create a variable, and I'm just giving QLI. So this is my name of the output table. So click on OK. And then once you define the variable, you can go to the variable tab and look the scope of the variable. Currently this scope is only limited to do loop, so we need to expand the scope for the entire flowchart. You can expand it, and then you can come back to the application main menu. Now what we are going to do, so we have saved this file and we are going to read the file. You can click on the debug file and click on run file. So you can see an Excel window pops up and then pops out. So that means you have properly read this file into the UiPath application. Next, we need to make sure whether our read file process was correct or not. For that, you can just assign this number of records to a variable. In that way, we will be clear like we have read the file in the right form. So you can just add an assign activity and grab it here. So assign means you are going to create a new variable from a particular expression. So here same thing, you can create a variable. So you can give a variable called number of rows. I'm just giving num underscore of underscore row. So this is the new variable which I'm going to create, and under the VB expression, so we know the name of the table. So to get the variable which you declared, you can press Ctrl space on your keyboard, and then you can select the table, and then you can press a dot. So it opens up all the options. So now we wanted to know the number of rows in this table. So you can type rows. So it opens up, you can press tab and then count. So if you click outside, still you can see an exclamation mark. So this means that this doesn't allow to directly use it inside the variable. So for that you need to change, because this number of rows by default it created in the form of a string. So you cannot assign a numeric value to a string variable. So in that case, what we can do, either you can change the variable to integer. So next we are going to print this to the output window so that we can understand how many number of records in this particular table has. So for that you can actually log a message in the window. Just type on log and you can see a log message. So you can just drag and drop, and inside the log level is just information, and this is where you can specify your message. So within double quotes you can see that you can given like number of rows in the table equal to, and you know the name of the variable which you defined. So you can press Ctrl space and you can select the number of rows variable, but this particular field is accept only strings. So you have to convert this numeric to a string variable. For that you can just type and to string, so it will convert to a string variable. So now we can close this and make sure we read the file in a proper way. You can go to the debug file and click on run file. Now if you go to the output window, you can see the number of rows in the table equal to 82. So that means we have properly read this table into the UiPath. Same way we can calculate the number of columns in a particular data table. So for that, I'm just going to create a new variable. So I'm just assigning and then create a variable called number of columns. So number of columns, if you go to the variable type, currently it is string. I'm just converting it into integer, and then under the VB expression, same way, just press Ctrl space, select your table, and then columns dot count. So that gives you the number of columns in that particular table. So now we can log that message here. So for that, either you can drag and drop a new log message, or you can copy paste this same log message in the same application. So I'm just going to Control C and Control V. So inside that you can specify your messages. In this particular case, we are specifying the number of columns. So just click on number of columns, select, and then convert it into string, because this particular message box accept only the character variables. So number of columns. Then go to the flowchart, save this, and then go to debug and run file. So if you go to the output, we can see that number of columns in the table is 11 and number of rows in the table is 82. Next, we are going to perform a loop activity. So right now we calculated the number of rows in the table, number of columns in the table, and now we are going to print all the observations in the table into the output window. Not all the observation, only one particular column we are going to print it to the output window. For that, you can just go to the activities and search for each. Now you can see under the programming data table option, you can see an option called for each row. So you can just drag and drop the activity to the last active window. And now if you open, by default, it is saying for each row, this is a row variable, and in where you wanted to loop. So in our case, we wanted to loop through all the rows inside our data table. So here you can just press Ctrl space and select your data table. The data table is QLI, and then we need to perform some activities. So to get a particular value inside the for loop, you can have get data item activity here. So you can just search for get data. So here you can see an option called get row item. So you can just drag and drop this get row item activity to the flowchart. So now if you look at the get row item, you can see different options. One is the column option, and the column index, column name, and then the row, and then finally the value. We need to store this to the output, and then this particular variable value we are going to print it into the output window. So before that, I just wanted to give an overview of what this for each row will do. If you go to the for each, it is saying for each row in QLI. So QLI is our table. So that means it takes the complete row inside the table. So we have to specify which column we are going to pull from this particular row. That is why you can see, if you go to the get row item activity, so here in the input, there is an option to specify the column. And one thing we need to remember is like here the index is starting at 0. For example, if you would like to get the first value of a column, then under the index you can specify a 0 value. So this is the first method we are going to prefer. So we are going to get all the column values based on the column index. So here I specified the column index as 0. So that means we are going to get the first column value because the index is starting at 0. And under the row, so here you have to specify the data row value. So you can just specify the row here. So this is the row which is actually we declared here. So we need to specify the same row, and then finally we have the output. So here you can create a variable, and store this value. So you can just give any meaningful name. So I'm just giving check variable, check var. So just click enter, and then that creates a variable. So if you go to the variable tab, so you can see like by default this check var is a string variable. So either you can keep it as a string, but that may cause some issues because our first column is not a string variable. So if you specify this it as a string, then it might can create a issue. So what you can do, you can change the variable type. So you can click on the small drop down arrow and you can browse for variable type. So you can set this variable type as generic. So you can just type generic, sorry. So under the generic option, you can see a UiPath generic system variable. So here you can see under the UiPath system activities, UiPath core generic value. So click on OK, and then you can close the variable tab. So now in the next step, we are going to print this value to the output. For that, I am just going to use the log message option once again. So you can just drag and drop this, you can just drag and drop this log message. So here the log level is the information, and in the message box you can actually specify what you are going to print. So you can just specify like the first column values are, and now you can just add a concatenate plus statement, and then you have to specify this check var option, then to string. Click on OK, and then select, and then save this, and then now you can close the Excel file to read the file. So let's go and check this. So here you can see the first column values are 1 2 3. So it prints all the values in the first column. Now if you change this option to second, you will be getting the second column value. Sorry, if you change this column index to 1, then you will be getting the second column, and if it is 2 means you will be getting the third column. So this is one method of getting this value. Another method is you can directly specify the name of the column. If you know the name of the column, then you can directly specify the name of the column. So once again we are going to just get the name of the column through this variable type. So what you have to do, you have to give the exact name which you specified in your input file. I'm just going to print the second column value. So in the column name, you have to specify this within double quotes. And then now you can close it. So let's see the output now. You can go to debug file and click on run file. So if you go to the output, you can see the, I think we have not changed the log message. So you can actually change the log message for a meaningful. The second column values are, just go to the debug and click on run file. If you go to the output, you can see the second column values are, all the country values are printed here. So you can have an option to iterate each of the data rows, and then you can do whatever you want inside this particular for loop. Next, we are going to use another loop activity. So in almost all the platform, there is something called do loop that is also available. So in UiPath also do loop is available. So you can just search for while. So here you can see different options. One is the do while and the while. So we are going to use the while loop because it first check the condition at the beginning stage. So if you double click the while loop, you can see it is checking a one particular condition, and this body executes until the condition is true. In our case, we are going to declare a variable first. I'm just going to declare a variable I, and the variable type is integer 32, and I am defining the scope within the flowchart. So now what we wanted to do, we need to execute until it reaches the last row in our particular table. So I'm just specifying our new variable I, which is less than, and then here we have to specify our data table count. So you can select the table and then rows dot count. So it means this particular loop is going to execute until it reaches the last row in our table. So within the body you can specify, first you have to add an assign activity, because you need to specify like until which point this loop should execute. So normally when we use the do loops, so this I variable should increment. So you can just specify I, and then you can add a 1 to the I, so that it completes the first one, then it goes to the second one, and then so on. So now I am going to add a log message activity. So I am going to print the second column. So in the log level, I'm just setting this to info, and under the message box, I'm just selecting this second column values. So in this particular case, we are going to define the selection in a different way. So first you have to specify the QLI, and then you can put a space, and then you can open two brackets. So what this first bracket is telling, here you have to specify the row number. So in our case, I is our incrementer, so we are going to specify I variable, and then the second value is your column number. So if you remember, the country variable is our second column, so I'm going to specify the index as 1. So that means it will loop through each row and it will print the country variable values in our outputs. So you can click OK. So you can come back here and then you can save. So please make sure when you're giving all the loops, you have to provide the meaningful description. Since this is for a learning purpose, I'm not going to do that. So you can just go to the debug file. So before that, you need to make sure your file is closed. You can just go to the debug file and click on run file. So now if you go to the output, you can see along with all the other things, you can see all the values are printed. So that means this is one way of getting your variable value in your output. So there are multiple ways are available to get each individual rows and column values. So in the upcoming sessions, when we are going to work on the real projects, we are going to cover all different methods. That's all for today, and we can catch up next week.
Hello. You can click on the subscribe button. And if you enable the bell icon, then you will be getting the notification as soon as I upload video in my channel. Thanks for watching.